Here we are back again, all sorts of changes, not least of which is you didn't hear the intro yet. So we're doing things a little bit differently here at MedTech Crossroads. But today is Friday, February 3rd. We are going to be talking all about poisoning communities. What does that have to do with medical product development, our community of startups and investors, and all those who try to bring healthcare technology to the world? Well, you're going to hear about that coming up here on MedTech Crossroads. We're going to be talking about a new incubator on the west side of the state. I believe you have some familiarity with the west side of the state, don't you, Steve?
Oh, just a little bit over there.
Just
I
a little
grew
bit.
up in the Grand Rapids area.
What's your favorite thing about the west side of the state? This is your chance to represent home.
I don't know. You're putting me on the spot. I don't know. It's just entirely different than the east side. I don't know how to describe it.
I love
It's
the beaches over there.
Yeah,
They're
the beaches
so
are nice.
cool. They're beautiful. We'll be talking about a West Michigan incubator coming up next on MedTech Crossroads. So the first thing I want to tell you before we talk about the events today is that we are officially on Spotify. The last 3 episodes are up there. More will come as time progresses. But in addition to watching on Zoom, watching on YouTube, you can also listen to everyone as a podcast on Spotify. We're pretty excited about that. We heard as we got back to in-person meetings, so many of you are interested in what we do and hearing about the community interviews and everything else, but you don't have time to watch the video. So now watching on Spotify, or rather listening on Spotify, is an option. There, MedTech Crossroads on Spotify. Oh, there's the slide. Now you can see it up there. But upcoming events brought to you by scanning the various event calendars of the organizations like MEDC, MishBio, Project MedTech, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Ann Arbor Spark, the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, and others. The first one we want to bring to you is the A2 Biosocial, being held February 7th at Pretzel Bell in Ann Arbor. Great time to get together with your community in person. Great food, great drink there at Pretzel Bell. Then coming up next, February 7th through 9th, Into Being is going to be at MD&M West with Team Michigan, part of the MEDC trade mission to the MD&M West Trade Show. It's going to be a great show. We'll bring you some reporting there. Great place to learn about components, vendors, etc. Then on February 17th, FDA is holding a Application of Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning for Precision Medicine webinar. And our friends at Fast Forward Medical Innovation and the Department of Internal Medicine at the U of M are holding Biomedical Innovation 101. There's sessions all throughout January and February, and you can get connected through that QR code if you happen to be watching on YouTube or Zoom. On February 14th, the IP and Legal Expert Virtual Coffee Break from MishBio. If you've got questions about IP or law for startups and medtech and everything else, you can go to that on February 14th. Just scan the QR code or contact us or go to the MishBio website. The Regulatory Affairs Professional Society is doing a virtual program at the end of February on software as a medical device. This is a paid teaching event, and you can go there and dive deep for 2 days into SAMD, or software as a medical device. RAPS is also holding, a couple days later, a cybersecurity in-person event. I really do think, the reason we even mention this, not so much that any of you are necessarily traveling to Europe just for this event, but cybersecurity is going to be one of the hot things that you haven't heard a lot about, but it's going to be coming up in spades because we get the normal things. We get biocompatibility, we get sterility, we think about design controls. We do all these things, when we're developing medical devices. Cybersecurity is on the horizon. There's going to be more and more cybersecurity issues, not least of which because there's so many software issues. I think one of these upcoming weeks we're going to be talking about some of the software issues that have been happening to some major companies. This isn't a small little niche thing. These are some major companies having software issues, and cybersecurity is just another element of software risk. There is a legislative fly-in coming in at the beginning of March with MISH-Bio. I believe we know now. I want to say it's the 5th through the 6th. I might have that wrong. We'll get that up here. But if you've ever wondered what it's like on Capitol Hill talking with congressional delegations, it's an amazing experience. I'll be on that this year with Stephen Rapundolo from MISH-Bio, and I just really encourage it. It's been 7 years since the last time I got to do that, and it should be very, very interesting. I think they want all sorts of folks from the community to come on that, and it's an opportunity there if you scan the QR code. There's a RAPS webcast, MDR by the numbers. This one's free. If you want to know about the medical device regulation in Europe and what's happening with that, it's not necessarily pretty, but that's going to be the 23rd of February. RAPS webcast, MDR by the numbers. It's the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. I got to know Resi a little bit when I was out in San Francisco during JP Morgan Week. It's the Redefining Early Stage Investments Conference. They're having a virtual event March 14th through 16th. One of their goals is to bring together startups and early stage investors. Can't hate that. And if you're interested in either side of that equation, there's a QR code here that you can scan if you're watching online. But it's the Resi Conference, RESI. MedTech Strategists holding an innovation summit in Dublin, Ireland, April 25th through 27th. And AdvaMed is doing more education on May 15th through 25th. 510K, IDE, and PMA submissions workshops from our friends at AdvaMed. We're going to hear more from AdvaMed today in a document that they actually sent to the White House. We'll be finding out why did AdvaMed write the White House. That's part of our main feature today. Project MedTech is running a Midwest showcase in August in Cleveland, Ohio. That should be a great gathering. And going back to Anaheim, California in October, the MedTech conference by AdvaMed will be October 9th through 11th this year out in Anaheim. Back to Project MedTech, they're running a startup symposium in Houston, Texas, October 25th and 26th. And then finally, two more things. The Combination Product Summit and the AI Summit coming back to Cleveland end of this year. And the Eye and the Chip, Dr. Hesberg's conference, coming back to Henry Ford Health System at the end of the year. So that's all the events for now. Next up, we'll be talking about the news. All right, we're trying a different format here today that we hope you really enjoy. It should be kind of fun. We are bringing up the news in a slightly different way, and I'm not sure if our lighting entirely worked. So we're going to work the bugs out of this, but we think this is going to be fun long term. We want to take you to the news not through PowerPoints and stuff like that, but just by looking at what's happening on the news. Coming from the folks who bring it to you direct, this first one we're going to go to, and I'm hoping we got the color balance going there. I think we've got some. Maybe we can just turn the room lights off here real quick, Steve. The overheads are kind of giving us some trouble. There we go. It's a little bit better. Hopefully, we got that working. Sorry for the technical difficulty. But here's the thing. We're going to start out with kind of a funny one. We are not giving these folks a hard time, folks. We are looking at this Stanford Daily headline. This is all over the web, actually, but Stanford Daily is the one we picked to bring it to you. This just caught my attention. It's Theranos, but it works. Stanford researchers say they've measured thousands of molecules from a single drop of blood. Well, that's a pretty cool claim. We do hope that turns out to be true, but of course, not the best marketing to say that this is the Theranos that works. So we wanted to dig in a little bit and find out exactly what does it mean when this company is saying, or this university is saying that they're Theranos that works. We're having all sorts of technical difficulties that we were not having during pre-production here. Of course, that's just the way it works. So we're going to try something slightly different here. Well, it turns out that the news is actually better than just a humorous thing. But what they say that they're doing, Stanford researchers say that they've accomplished what Theranos was unable to do. They've developed a new approach that can measure thousands of molecules with about 1 drop of blood. And if you remember back in the day, that's basically what Theranos was saying. They were saying we can measure all sorts of things from a single drop of blood. Now, why would anyone, especially from the state of California, make the claim that they can measure all sorts of things from 1 drop of blood? Now, they're getting a little bit of support from one of their Stanford medicine professors who had called out Theranos, John Ioannidis, and he says there is scientific backing for this. Theranos was famous for doing things in stealth mode. Of course, they wouldn't talk about their research. And those of us in the MedTech development industry, diagnostics, we were very, very close, on other projects. And we would look at Theranos and we'd go, we don't know what they're doing, but maybe they figured something out. Don't think so. But maybe they figured something out. And then, of course, it was the Wall Street Journal reporter who discovered by simply running 2 tests and getting completely erroneous different results, that their hardware wasn't working. Then they got in trouble with FDA, and the problems just compounded. And they didn't talk openly. And Michael Snyder, the genetics department chair at Stanford, is publishing. He's saying all sorts of things about it. We're going to show you a little bit of this. So even though we make light of this as a funny thing to say, it's Theranos, but it works. There's actually something behind this. Stanford Medicine News Center, little article here. They're talking about this technique called multi-omic microsampling. They call it multi-omics technologies. And I guess if you'd forgive me, we could think that sounds like flashy language, but let's get a little bit more into it. They're saying that we've shown you can collect blood drop at home and mail it into the lab. Well, as somebody who has seen many births, my wife and I have 9 children, we've seen many, heel pricks, and we've seen many of those blood tests that they do, and those get mailed in. So, okay, yeah, I believe this. We can collect blood samples and mail them into the lab. I get it, but let's actually take a look at some of the research that's been going on here. This is actually the paper that they published. It's called Multi-Omic Microsampling, Captures Health Perturbations in a Lifestyle Context. And this is by Dr. Snyder and team there at the Department of Genetics. And why are we doing this? Because I know our company, Into Being, we work on diagnostics all the time. I know many of you invest in them. Many of you are inventing diagnostics. So here's another example of a big claim diagnostic coming out of Stanford. What are they saying? What are they actually saying they're doing? They're collecting fixed 10 microliter volumes, and following extraction, they're analyzing proteins, metabolites, lipids, and targeted cytokines and hormones from a single sample. And what's interesting is they did 2 proof of principle studies. One demonstrated a response to a mixed meal shake. They took an Ensure dietary shake, and that's what they used to put stuff into your body to then measure in these drops of blood what has come out. It's kind of a cool idea. And then secondly, they performed high-resolution profiling of an individual for 1 week. Looking at that, I think Dr. Steiner, I think that was him who volunteered for that. So they're collecting this in a Mitra device, a solid matrix that collects fixed blood volumes. and they're basically extracting from that. Now, that's not too surprising. Getting a small drop of blood, reconstituting it, separating it, taking it to different things. Of course, that's something that Theranos never claimed. They always sort of claimed that they were doing it on one device, and no such thing here. Nor is this commercially ready. Dr. Snyder has made clear this is still early research. But fascinating nonetheless. This is the path of how they intend to take it through their analyses. And what they did then, as we said earlier, they took an Ensure shake that, of course, comes with carbs and protein and fat and everything else. And they had a test protocol by which they looked to see if they could see what came through. You drink the shake, you wait a bit, you take this finger prick, and we see if we can measure those things. Data does abound. We're not going to bore you with it, but they go on to show all the sorts of things that they've captured. They then matched this up with things like Fitbit data and continuous glucose monitoring data. So quite an interesting study. And like we say, we had to give them a little bit of a hard time for saying, don't, it's like Theranos, but it's going to work. But I think this is very interesting. Obviously, a lot of data there, obviously much more transparent. So we look forward to seeing what Dr. Snyder and team come up with. And I will say one more thing. In our business at NTBing, when we're developing medical devices and diagnostic devices and these things for healthcare, when a researcher can come and say, I've done this kind of a thing, not just I've got an idea, this is wonderful, right? There's so many iterations. We've talked on the show about iterations before, going through product iterations. And something like what Dr. Snyder is doing here is definitely laying that groundwork so that questions can be asked. And when it comes time to say, what are we actually building? There might actually be some answers. So hats off to them. And if we just take a look really quick, here's kind of the summary. We thought we'd just do this. Here's a quick overview of what we just talked about. But Stanford Daily, Theranos, that works. Some of the major quotes that we just talked through. There's the sample flow. And that unique aspect of using an Ensure shake to get, shall we say, data into the human so that it can be sampled later to demonstrate the technology. Kind of a cool technique. Well, yeah, Steve, I put you on the spot earlier, but you actually passed this on to the whole team. This new startup incubator on the west side on Medical Mile in Grand Rapids. We took this particular article from the Michigan Business Beat. The folks over there, Jeffrey Mosher, doing this particular interview. You can listen to it where Kyle McGregor, the Director of Health Innovations in Grand Rapids, and Mike Mraz, the President of Real Estate Development of Rockford Construction. There's a SoundCloud podcast there if you want to hear more about it. This on Michigan Business Beat, the Michigan Business Network right there. But what is this thing? I'm going to show you a picture. In this Doug Meyer Medical Innovation Building on the Medical Mile in Grand Rapids, right downtown there, there is a new incubator going in. And this is the one, it's a partnership between Spartan Innovations and Rockford Construction. Located at the Doug Meyer Medical Innovation Building, the new office incubator aims to drive innovation through relationships across tenants, resulting in new discoveries within the market. And, in years past, when I would hear about things like this, I would think, oh boy, there goes another incubator accelerator. It's not going to work. Maybe I shouldn't admit to that, but of course, we've seen in the last number of years here on the east side of the state, Mark Smith with MIHQ, without a question, without a doubt, taking over. I don't think you can even get space in the original MIHQ incubator at this point. I think all the space is now in MIHQ East and Ypsilanti. And so now when I hear about these things, I think to myself, well, if it's not trying too hard, and if it's taking a play out of Mark Smith's playbook, this kind of a thing could work. It could be a good thing. I think in the past in our community, people tried too hard to be all to all. They would try too hard to offer so many things. We'll give you accountants and we'll give you engineers and we'll give you all these things. Just come be located here. And while some of those synergies do exist in these locations where you can bump into people and create relationships, I think what we're seeing now is a focus on doing real estate well for a particular demographic. That's one of the things that MAHQ, I think, has done so well in our observation from the local ecosystem, is custom making space in their facility for startups and small companies, even mid companies' needs that a normal landlord who's used to just office space might not be able to make. So if this is anything like that, West Michigan may be in for a treat. We'll see how it pans out. And we'll look forward to hearing more from the Spartan Innovations folks about this in future days. There's one more picture of the Doug Meyer Medical Innovation Building on the Medical Mile in Grand Rapids. Well, this is the one that we put as the top of the podcast. Are sterile medical devices poisoning communities? Well, that's what on earth? Because I thought the whole point was to make them sterile so they wouldn't hurt people. Isn't that the idea? Well, it turns out that yes, when you make medical devices sterile, they don't hurt the people that you put them into or onto, but how you sterilize them turns out to be a bit of an issue. So first, this article from January 21st of this last year. Boston Scientific and Sterigenics had to start tracking ethylene oxide emissions. Ethylene oxide is one of the, in some ways, easiest ways to sterilize medical products. You put things on a skid. Once you've validated it, skid goes in. This really poisonous gas infiltrates every aspect of the product, goes right through the packaging. Then you pump it all out. It goes away. None is left. The product is sterile, and it's not toxic afterwards. So that's great. But what about all that gas that you just put in? Well, that gas has to come out, get reclaimed, get sequestered somehow. So the EPA has started requiring facilities to track their ethylene oxide emissions. And they say it's part of a push to protect communities from the carcinogenic chemical. So it turns out that the best thing to sterilize, not the best, but one of the best things to sterilize medical products with just happens to be carcinogenic. So there's 31 facilities that use ETO to sterilize medical devices. And they let a few off the hook, but they've got a final list that they wanted to follow and are required to report. So facilities covered by the TRI requirements must track how much of a toxic chemical they put into the environment. Well, I guess that's a good thing. We are thankful for that. It turns out that in 1992 through 2016, a bunch of folks stopped reporting, but that doesn't appear to have been nefarious or underhanded. It's just that they were not legally obligated to. And so they stopped reporting. But this has become more and more and more of a concern. Let me show you a map here. Here's a location near Columbus, Nebraska. Becton Dickinson Pharmaceutical Systems. And the, I think this was the National Institutes of Health. This might have been EPA. EPA's estimates. There it is. EPA's estimates of lifetime cancer risks in this neighborhood. Literally this neighborhood. There's a subdivision over here, right? There's a subdivision right here. There's an industrial building here. This is the facility that we're talking about. This is the sterilizer right here. So within the boundary of the sterilizer facility, they're showing the increase in cancer risk, lifetime residential cancer risk, Now, we don't know how they calculated this. They've got some details down here. A lifetime cancer risk of 100 in a million means that if 1 million people were exposed to this level of ETO in the air 24 hours a day for 70 years, 100 people would be expected to develop cancer from that exposure. So it is kind of a low number. We don't know how robust that number is, but obviously this is a scary looking map. If you live in one of those two subdivisions near an ethylene oxide processing facility, you might have reason to wonder about your health. And that's legitimate, although I don't think we understand the magnitude of that. So that would be something for another show. Don't take that one way or the other. Well, what's the upshot of this? EPA has been giving folks grief, and another one from MedTech Dive here. Turns out that there have been lawsuits. So Sterigenics, a major user of ethylene oxide, a major sterilizer in the MedTech development community, nearly a $500 million settlement to resolve hundreds of lawsuits, specifically in Illinois. We're not even talking about other states at this point. Sterigenics agreed to pay that $408 million without admitting liability. So they're just trying to make this problem go away. There have been more than 870 cases brought against Sterigenics in Illinois. That's a lot of cases. And our job here isn't to take a position for or against, but just to explain what is happening. Because it also turns out that this is one of the most common and most economical ways to sterilize medical devices. So while people's health in the neighborhoods matters dramatically, if we are poisoning people, that's an important thing to be thinking about. But at the same time, healthcare costs are an important thing to be thinking about. And this is definitely impacting how companies sterilize their product, whether they can have any access to sterilized product. So much so that the Advanced Medical Technology Association, AdvaMed, January 18th, wrote President Joe Biden, and they said, they're writing on a critical public health matter, the update on emission standards for facilities using ethylene oxide to sterilize medical devices. We commend the Environmental Protection Agency for completing this updated review. And they say down here, in the absence of updated federal regulations and regularly reducing emissions even more than required, and risk projections are based on highly conservative modeling rather than actual data, the public condemnation from a federal agency is unfair and undeserved. We would ask you to consider the potential threat to patient care if any sterilization facilities shut down. There are 20 billion medical devices sterilized using ETO each year at about only 100 facilities. Might be smaller than that even. The closure of even a small percentage would harm patients. And it's not just medical devices, it includes surgical kits. So when you go into surgery and the surgeon pulls the tools out, they're pulling it from a surgery kit that was probably sterilized with ETO. A prior closure of just one facility caused a temporary shortage of pediatric breathing tubes. FDA knows about this. So this is really the challenge that AdvaMed is bringing to the fore. We can't be poisoning people in neighborhoods. We also can't be taking away medical devices from doctors and surgeons. They need access to these to be able to keep doing their jobs. And so something's going to happen here. Not sure what, but how does this impact us in the medical technology delivery community? Well, basically, you can expect for the next while, it's still going to be hard to get serviced by sterilizers. They are swimming upstream right now, and we've seen that in our industry, getting testing done, getting sterilization done, all these things, much longer than they were, shall we say, pre-pandemic, 2018, 2019. So not great news, but we will see. We'll see what comes of this. And at least both sides are talking about it. So we're glad for AdvaMed's advocacy. We're also glad for the EPA's advocacy to say, hey, wait, we can't be poisoning people. But I think right in the middle is, what is the actual effect? And that's something that will be talked about ongoing. Well, if it seems too good to be true, it just might be. GoodRx got started for bringing the cost down on prescriptions. You need drugs, cost too much. Let's bring that cost down. Well, FTC slaps a $1.5 million fine on GoodRx for sharing users' health data with Facebook and Google. The FTC says that GoodRx deceptively promised its users that it would never share personal health information with advertisers or other third parties, but did. Now, we haven't heard, in this case, we don't have GoodRx's response up here, so I suppose innocent until proven guilty. But this does sort of follow along that general pattern of, if it seems too good to be true, or if the product is free, you're the product. We've heard that many times with regards to how we got into the challenges of today with Facebook and Google in general. And it would make sense that getting data on your drug usage would be something that would be almost too good to be true for Facebook and Google. So under this order from the FTC, GoodRx will be banned from disclosing users' health information with third parties for advertising purposes. It will also be required to limit how long it can retain personal and health information according to a data retention schedule. They're also trying to make them delete data by contacting the companies that it shared it with. That's going to be a lot of work. But what effect does this have on us as a MedTech delivery and development community? Well, I think it's just this. Models change and develop. Everybody loves big data. Everybody wants to get into big data. It's a thing. But it turns out that not every model is going to work. So just the fact that somebody was leveraging things in a way that worked for them at one point and everyone else got excited about it and all the investors get excited about it, some of these models are going to break down. Big data is sometimes bigger than it really needs to be. And we're seeing this here. Oh, we're just going to share the data under the hood. No one's going to care. Well, I think people are starting to care. So as startups talk about their use of big data, they talk about their use of diagnostics, keep examples like this in mind, because public opinion appears to be changing. And when somebody like the FTC gets behind it, that could really make a big difference in what future legislation is. Well, that's about it for the news today. We hope you like the new format. I'm going to be able to use the English language one of these days after 135 shows. But what we have up next for you, we always love bringing you interviews, and we recorded a whole bunch of them at MEDICA in Dusseldorf, Germany, that trade show with more than 50,000 people, 17 floors. And one of the reasons we thought it would be interesting to bring you some of the content from MEDICA, we were there just exploring what the European market looks like. But many of you who are running startups or advising startups, as they start to think about their first foray into the world of marketing, going to trade shows. One of the things that I had never realized before was this whole process of lead generation. It's a real thing. And if you're planning to market your services or your medical products, something you probably want to be thinking about. There are groups out there that actually do lead generation. And we got connected with one of these, PSPS Business Abroad. Now, they didn't pay us to say this. We just were impressed with what they had done. And we found that they had a whole strategy for doing lead generation. So in other words, don't go to the trade show blind. Don't go in thinking, oh, we'll talk to whoever we talk to. Take the time to reach out because you will have contact lists associated with these trade shows. And up next, we're going to run a video where I interviewed Carl Sturm from PSPS Business Abroad, and he had a few interesting thoughts about how they approach lead generation. business abroad. And we got to know each other because you guys are doing work for MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation.
Yes.
And we got to use your services. And at first I was like, oh, what is that? And then I was like, oh my goodness, this is really important stuff for going to a trade show like this with what, 50,000 people here, do we think? Do we even know what the number is?
Most probably around that or even higher, yeah.
Even higher.
Yeah.
It's a gigantic trade show with 17 buildings full of people. But Carl, you're a project manager for PSPS. Tell us a bit about your role and also about what the company does.
Yeah. First of all, Jeannie, thank you so much for having me here. It's also a pleasure for me also seeing you in person here. I think that's always a great opportunity. You told it already, I'm a project manager. We're working very diverse, but maybe let's first talk about the company. We're an international business. We're very diverse there, coming from trade missions for governments, or also representatives like for Michigan or also for Pennsylvania. We help usually smaller sized enterprises with their foreign market entry, but we also do this the other way around, coming from international countries towards the Netherlands. We're based in the Netherlands, in The Hague. I already gave a teaser now, but we work very internationally. Yeah, and that's maybe in a nutshell what we do.
That's really cool. And I don't think I really understood before coming to this just how important that lead generation process is. Walk us through your process that you take a company through.
So within our company, we offer the service, what you're just referring to, leads to business. And as you just say, leads are a key for every business, and especially when expanding businesses. And we see that a lot of things are very unpersonalized and come over more like a classical sales effect. And that's something we really try to prevent in our approach. So for us, we usually kick it off with a longer intake. You've experienced that yourself. We really try to get to know and get a grasp of how you see your company, but also how you work and what it entails. Usually I would say those go into three categories. We come from the normal business activity. We ask you about your marketing approaches, but also about the sales approaches. And I think often-wise there we already have some learning outcomes for both sides, because maybe someone has it very clear in his mind and someone else hears that question for the first time and is thinking, oh yeah, that's actually an interesting fact. So in that case, in the intake...
It was a very in-depth intake interview. I was like, wow, you actually care about learning about my business, which was pretty cool.
I think for us it's really important because usually in our lead service we take over your profile as kind of a, one could say, ghostwriting. But in that sense, it's very important that we understand how you see it and how you would approach it yourself. Because we definitely want to go in the same direction you're going, and we don't want to do something no one is used to from your environment, let's say.
Yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Tell me about your sort of philosophy about it then. That's the process, but tell me about your philosophy. What should lead generation and then contacting those leads be about? How do you think about it?
I think what we just talked about, the intake, is a very important step in that process, also for the philosophy, because it entails who you're trying to target and where you're trying to go. And this comes back then to the philosophy, since we're on your side, let's say, talking for you, approaching for you. We really see this long-term effect of building up leads and building this lead tunnel, able to use it at the present moment, like a trade show like today, but also in the long term. And in that sense, for us, it's really important in the process to not go for a classical sales approach, giving someone a decisioning moment straight away. We think it's very more effective if you have a moment of interaction and also engagement where you show interest towards a party because you actually have an interest there. And I think often that gets lost on the way if you have a straight sales question. You don't really give an impression to another person that you're actually interested in what they're doing. And I think this is a big point which makes a difference in the long term as well.
I guess sometimes people call it win-win, or I've heard people say business is a series of yeses. Most of the interactions here at MEDICA have been phenomenal with different people, and a sort of a respectful attitude of like, I'm not here to tell you what you need to do with respect to me, but let's talk about our mutual businesses.
Exactly,
And I think it's neat to see that mentality coming through, but definitely that's how you're driving that.
I think also that's really what we experience and why we're driving in this way. As you just said, in the end, the person you're talking to is a human, and you have a human interaction, and we're not engaging on a very formal level. We can talk as persons, and I think driving this approach and a lead approach is very important to drive engagement and also a positive image on what you're trying to achieve in the end.
Very cool. How do people get in touch with PSPS Business Abroad?
We have a website, PSPS-BA.nl. And otherwise, yeah, there you have all contact information on us and on our team. And otherwise, also directly via mail with my surname and then PSPS-BA.nl.
Well, yeah. I've been very impressed with what you guys do, and I think people should know about it. And
thank you very much.
Hopefully, there's some people come your way.
Super, yeah.
Good to see you here.
Thanks, Jeannie, for it.
Yeah. So that's the end of the MEDICA interviews. We sure had a good time there with the MEDC trade delegation, just getting Michigan companies exposed to the international market to expand their international presence. And I'm glad we're having that discussion because it seems like when I got into the business of MedTech development with the two startups that I work for before into being, things just were not as out there and big and thriving as they are today. And it just continues to grow, and it's exciting to watch it. We will actually be in Anaheim next week at the MD&M trade show. We'll bring you some content from that. And as always, you can find all these episodes on YouTube. You can click the playlist there that has all 135 episodes going all the way back to back when MedTech Crossroads was COVID Connect. And also this week we are officially on Spotify. So if you go to Spotify and plug in MedTech Crossroads, you will find us. There are 3 episodes up and more coming. So we will look forward to bringing you the rest of those in the coming weeks. Well, let's see. We're going to take just a minute in case there's any comments or questions, announcements, or anything like that from anybody who happens to be on the Zoom meeting. We'll give just about 30 seconds for that. I'm going to scooch over here and check that. Okay, and not seeing anything there, we are going to thank you for being here with us on MedTech Crossroads. We'll see you next week.